The two most important skills the next decade going forward, I think you're going to need as an entrepreneur, are the ability to network, collaborate, and negotiate. So network and collaborate as one skill, and negotiate as the second skill. And let me walk you through why I think those are. The way that the internet is going at the moment, and business, is there's going to be more and more involvement with AI. And it's going to be almost impossible for an entrepreneur to have all of the different skills that you need in order to make something work. And you're also going to be competing with AI. But if you have the ability to network, so talk to a lot of other people in your industry, talk to a lot of people who are doing something similar, talk to people who might have information that you have, and collaborate with them. So in other words, they give you something, you give them something, you give them something of value. It might be your time, it might be your expertise, and they do the same. But I think moving forward, if you're going to move at any kind of scale, not just for individual entrepreneurs, but for businesses, you've got to be able to collaborate. And that brings us to the second skill, which is negotiation. Now, a lot of people just, for whatever reason, they're just not good to talk to people. They're not good at making deals. They're not good at thinking through things logically. But it's a skill that you should learn. And there's lots of books out there on it. One of the best, actually, is a book by Chris DeVos, I think it is. He Never Split the Difference is the name of the book. And he was an FBI negotiator, and he has some excellent ways to negotiate. But as you find things and skills or resources that you need, you have to have the ability to go out there, talk to people, and present an offer or a situation that is appealing to them so that they can see the benefit of working with you. And as you build that network, you'll find it's like joining the dots. The person who you collaborated with knows someone who knows someone who knows someone, and so on. There's also a very interesting study where if you introduce two people to each other, the person that is perceived as having the most power is the person who introduced those people. So never be afraid to, if somebody asks you if you have something and you don't have it, and you can pass them on to somebody else or your friends, then always do that. But if you can cultivate this idea of collaboration, if you can, start to hone your skills as a negotiator, as someone who can try and see a deal. Now, it's interesting, this deal part, because even now I'll talk to people who are almost offended if you offer them a deal. They might be selling a business, they might be selling a car, they might have a service, and maybe it's just me, it's in my instinct to ask for a deal. So let's say somebody has a service and it costs $10,000. I'll say, what's the best price you can do in that? Sometimes they'll say, we can't move, or yeah, we can do you 10% if you pay us the next 24 hours, or something. But if ever it's appropriate, I'm going to say, what about, would you be prepared to accept a lower amount? For example, $7,000. And I can tell you the majority of time when you actually ask for a discount, you'll get it. That rather than lose the business, a lot of people and businesses will work with you to get you to where you want to go. And it's the same with people. So it's not about taking advantage of people. It's trying to find out where they really perceive value and the point at which they won't move. So in a negotiation, for example, if I'm buying a business and the person wants $1 million for it, there's two things that I'm thinking through in my mind. Thing number one is I want to negotiate the price. So it's rare that I'll say, yeah, that's a great deal, unless he's so undervalued the business that it makes sense. And even then, I might have a stab at trying to reduce the price. But for example, one of my favorite techniques when that situation presents itself is to ask, how did you get to that price? Because I always think logically when I'm buying a business, and it's a multiple of the business that I'm buying. So it's a multiple of the free cash flow, and that tells me how quickly I will get my money back. So there's a logic behind the price that I'm going to offer. And the person who's selling often doesn't have any logic. He just grabbed a number out of thin air. If I can demonstrate to the person that this is how I got to a fair value, and if you took it to 10 brokers, they would probably value it the same way. They would probably maybe, embellish the price of it, but the realistic price is this in the market, and this is why. Now, I may, one way to negotiate with that is you might need to put things in once the owner leaves, and that would reduce how much the company earns. So if that is the case, I might offer him slightly less. But what I'm really interested in is how he wants paid. How is the deal constructed? Is there any kind of finance that can be done? Is there any kind of creative finance there? Is there an earn in, an earn out? What is the payment period? Could it be done? So, if the business, for example, costs $1 million, and I can find a way to say, listen, I'll give you 50% down and the balance over 5 years at this interest rate, would that make you happy? And, previously, if the guy has said he intends to retire, if you're offering him a higher percentage than he would get if he was in the bank, it can be appealing. I've done deals where it's been as little as 10 or 20% down, where the repayment period has been 10, 15, 20 years. There's a lot of different things there that need to be explored, and every deal has its own behavior, its own makeup, its own personality. But if you don't have those conversations, then it's very hard to get to a good deal. Now, it's the same when you're collaborating, right? You might talk to somebody, and on the surface of it, there's not a lot of synergy there. It doesn't sound or look like that if you both work together, there was much that you could get from it. But if you start to think outside the box, where is their strength? Where is your strength? Who are your contacts? How can you get together to buy things? Sometimes you can, squeeze the price and things if you buy more of it. So really, you could call that negotiation a deal maker. So your ability to collaborate and make deals is where I think most of the entrepreneurs are going to be successful going forward. The people who are not prepared to collaborate and not prepared to see deals will struggle more. If you like these tips, don't forget to subscribe, leave me some feedback. I'd love to hear from you guys. Thanks for listening.